Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another special episode of Dead Men Talk. And I always love it when I can bring a fellow writer on. I love having all my guests on from all walks of the creative spectrum, as it were. But I love it when I get to speak to a fellow writer and kind of get into their head. And one has come onto my radar recently, and it's actually someone whose book I am reading at the moment, and I'm really loving it. So I really want to get into talking about the story behind her story. I introduce Henya Drescher, the author of Stolen Truth. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris, very much. Pleasure to be here.
And yeah, it's great to have you. Great to have you. And
Yeah.
I think when you first got in touch and you kind of, and I found out more about your backstory, you know, regardless of the story that you've written, your backstory, I know you've got a real kind of interesting tale to tell along the way. So I think the best thing to do, like I normally like to do, obviously I've introduced your book, Stolen Truth. I understand it's not the only writing that you've done. So let's kind of wind it back to the beginning. When did you first discover writing or decide that you wanted to start writing for yourself? When did that begin?
Okay, so I'm not going to pull out the violin and tell you a sad, sob story, but I was a very lonely child, and that was, I didn't have any friends. Books were my friends. So I pretty much emulated myself, my personality to the characters that I admired. And I had a lot of pent-up stuff that I needed to talk about. So
Sure.
We'll go back to, I was raised in Israel. I was born in France, and my parents were Polish, and they were Holocaust survivors.
Wow.
So they brought me and my brother into a very troubled world,
Sure.
you know, their world, because they never really got over that hump, you know, and were able to enjoy life to the fullest because that horrible thing in the past. So needless to say, they didn't know how to raise, I'll talk about myself now. They didn't really know how to raise me. So I was left to myself, to fend for myself since I was very, very young. And so I had a lot of emotion that I needed an outlet. And I started writing, actually I started reading at the age of 3.
Wow.
And yes, and because language was always something that I was very interested in, to be able to express myself, to be able to read, to be able to get into these different worlds, these beautiful worlds that, you know, the amazing authors are able to paint.
Yeah.
And so through them, I learned a lot how to express myself. So I wrote poetry, and I'm going back because I started reading at the age of 3. And then I really started writing, I think at the age of 10 or 11, somewhere around there. So I started to write poetry. And of course, it was sub-stories and stories of heartache and loneliness.
Yeah.
And I think that writers really, the most basic human feelings come from pain. And, you know, most great writers.
Yeah. I'm with you there. And whatever you turn it into, in the end, it's come from almost the same place. So whether it ends up being like a romance book or even children's books, really speaking from experience, you know, but it comes from these real sort of guttural sort of feelings you've got inside somewhere, you know, and it's how how you manifest them and how you control them, I suppose, isn't it? It's so what you started reading at the age of 3. What were some of your favorites back then that you grew up with then?
Well, since I grew up in Israel, so of course I will not tell you anybody. It was mostly Russian writers, Dostoevsky, you know, as such.
Yeah.
War and Peace, which I read over and over again.
Wow. Okay.
And actually, I never read it in English, though. I really should read it in English. I'll probably get a different view. Yeah, so Israeli authors, Amos Oz, prolific writer. Actually, he died a few years ago. And the authors that I like to read are those who had something to tell me.
Okay.
and to teach me.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from them.
Yeah. So when did obviously you started writing poetry, you mentioned there. When did it transition into writing more sort of the fiction side, you know, that you, where did your path take you towards being a published writer? Sort of what took you on that path?
Okay, so that path was a little broken along the way in my history.
Mm-hmm.
So the first try to write a book when I was 13 years old, and it was sort of half-hearted. I
Mm-hmm.
think I still have it someplace in the basement. So I never finished it. And I just, in school, I remember whenever my schoolmate needed something to write for a play, I would be the one that would go to.
Okay.
For holidays, I would be the one. So I was always writing something, and it came very naturally to me. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even have to. And then at the age of 17, we moved to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So that path was broken because I didn't speak English.
Okay.
And I wanted to divorce Hebrew completely and entirely because I couldn't deal with the fact that I was leaving a beloved country behind because of my
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
They were looking for a better life.
Sure.
And they did get a better life here, which they couldn't there. They
Yeah.
really suffered. So then I went to school to learn how to, first of all, to read and write in English.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I went to college, and I didn't finish college, and then I got married,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a child. So I
Right.
was busy raising my child.
Life is happening.
Life was happening, and
Yeah.
but I continued reading.
Yeah.
Always loved to read. So that was something that kept me going. And then my husband and I got divorced, and we were married 10 years later, so we are still married now. So when we got divorced, in order to sustain myself financially, I built a business, a cosmetic business. I was busy doing that for 10 years.
Yeah.
Then I decided, when my husband and I got back together, he said, please don't go back to work, go back to school, get yourself more educated. So I went back to Hunter College, and I got my degree in English literature. And while I was in college, I reacquainted myself again with writing and reading and learning about all this beautiful British literature. It was
Okay.
mostly British literature.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And I fell in love with it again. And then I took courses in how to write and how to express myself.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, that's all I've been doing. So now I'm working on I have 2 books that are not published that over the years I was writing. And actually I'll go back and I'll try to get them published. And I'm working on, this was the book we're talking about now, Stolen Truth, is my 3rd novel. And I'm working on my 4th novel. And propensity toward psychological thrillers. And the book that we're talking about now is a psychological thriller.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and we'll get on. We'll talk about that one then. Really, but since it's one of the main reasons that you're on, and it's very topical for me at the moment because, like I say, I am sort of delving into it. I'm a horror writer. I'm much like fiction of a darker ilk. So I'm not necessarily always drawn to thrillers. I must admit, I've got some friends who really they go through and through, you know, tones of thrillers and crime thrillers and that kind of thing. I've been instantly hooked into this one. Because again, I'll let you introduce it in a second, but it's really it's the tragedy of the main character. You really sort of are dropped into this tragic event straight away, where she wakes up and her husband and her newborn child are gone. And it sort of very quickly moves into, obviously you experience that with her, but then it's quickly it's the almost like the accusation, the untold accusations of whether she's actually making this up. You know, it's the disbelief of people around her. Where did the inspiration come from this? Firstly, is this a story that you've you've heard in some form or fashion before, or where did the idea sort of manifest?
No, I started with a woman who woke up and a baby disappeared, and I took it from there.
Fair enough.
I just, a page at a time, the story just kept evolving in
Yeah.
my head. And I do have sort of, I know the beginning and I know the end
Sure.
of my book, usually.
Yeah.
How it evolves in the middle, which is, a lot more difficult to write.
Yeah.
So, what I decided to do is I decided to drop the reader into, as you said, into a catastrophe in the protagonist's mind, because you don't really know throughout the book whether she's delusional or not.
Yeah.
And for the sake of the listeners, so what the story is about, so what happens when you wake up in the morning and your baby is gone, and then you call the police, your husband and child are gone, disappeared. You call the police, and first the disbelievability of it, because, she's running around the house and looking, she can't believe that she's really, and she calls the police, and then the police come and say, okay, well, describe the husband to me. Can you show me a picture? Can you show me a birth certificate? Can you show me a marriage license? Nothing.
Yeah.
There's no evidence whatsoever in the house that she lived there with anybody but herself.
Yeah.
And so the police says, okay, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you because I can't go by anything.
No.
And so she's left on her own to fend for her. And but the thing is that eventually you learn that she, a few years earlier, she suffered from false pregnancy. So now in the reader's mind is, oh, did that happen again?
Yeah.
Is that something that she's wishing in her mind?
Yeah.
But throughout the book, you go on a journey with her looking for that baby, but you don't really know whether she, whether there is a baby and there is a husband.
Yeah.
And so that trajectory is really heart-wrenching, because her aunt doesn't believe her, her best friend doesn't believe her, sister doesn't believe her. She tries to tell them, but so again, she's left by herself. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, early on as well, in the early stages of the book that I'm at, already, she's been challenged by a couple of the characters that you just mentioned, whether this actually happened, because there's no evidence, and they obviously they've not been around her to know that she's been pregnant and given birth now. All the arguments she comes back with are very plausible, that she's telling the truth. Because instantly, if someone's accused of well, there's nothing here to show that this has happened, you would automatically think, okay, maybe they're having a bit of an episode. This isn't really they've imagined the whole thing. But what she comes back with, and how the story's set up with why she is where she is and why she hasn't seen these people, it's very believable.
Exactly. So what I did is I put an unreliable narrator, and I dropped her in the middle of this beautiful topography. And the topography that I chose, we have a house, a summer home up in the mountains, and it's very remote.
Right.
So that's where I placed her. So what I did, there are no houses around, even where we are.
Yeah.
So I was able to describe the topography, and so I'm so familiar with it. So what I did is I took this beautiful nature and beautiful bucolic atmosphere, and I put that unreliable and troubled narrator, dropped her in the middle of it to disturb that quiet, the peace and quiet, the trees, the flowers, the birds. You see nothing but sky.
Yeah.
And at night, you pitch black. If you drive down those roads and you turn off your headlights for a second, you'll be lost.
Right.
That's how dark. And so I put her in that, this beautiful area.
So idyllic, isn't it? Nothing bad should happen,
Exactly. And nothing bad does happen there, but with her, something bad did happen.
Yeah.
In her mind, I don't want to tell you what, because the end is really shocking, though. So you'll have to continue reading.
I will.
It's really, because you won't even know.
Yeah.
You will not even guess. See, that's the thing. That's the challenge for a writer, is how to string you along. And my job is to take every page. At the end of the page, you need to turn it over.
Yes.
This is how, exactly. Yeah. So this is how I do that. I have these cliffhangers after every paragraph, after every chapter.
Yeah. I like books that, because I typically read at night before I go to bed. So some books, I quite like them to have short chapters that I can read a couple of, switch off. But books like yours, they do keep me thinking. I know I've got to put the book down at some point because, I need to be up early or whatever. And then you just keep thinking of the story. I think that's probably where I'm not knowing enough about the thriller genre, even as a writer. But the difference between, or probably the similarities between psychological and crime thrillers, is you're always questioning your mind what's coming next. But the difference with the psychological ones, again, correct me if I'm wrong, really, this is just from an outsider's point of view, you're not trying to like find out who the killer is, or trying to solve a crime necessarily. You're just trying to figure out what's coming next for this person.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
exactly. That is the difference between psychological thrillers or just thrillers, or just suspense novels. Suspense novel, you know who to go after. With thrillers, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And that is very, very difficult to do. But readers' appetite towards psychological thrillers is very big. Most books that are being sold are thrillers and psychological thrillers, the larger portions.
Yeah.
People
like
that. Reason why.
People probably like that element of, I don't know what's coming, I need to find out, kind of thing, or trying to solve things out for themselves.
Well, it challenges your intellect, it challenges your brain. It actually, you become an active reader, not a passive reader.
Yeah.
So, as you're reading, you're thinking, well, how am I going to, so you become a detective, right?
Yeah.
You started reading, so you become a detective.
Yeah.
How am I going to solve it before the author tells me what's going on? Do I have any clues? And the clues are there throughout. And you won't even, I promise you will not even know what the clues are. But they're there.
Cool.
So you drop them in. And it's a big challenge. And this book was so successful. I did everything that I wanted to do, and the response that I got was unbelievable.
Oh.
So it's making my job now with the fourth novel to try and write it as well, and I'm having a hard time.
Really?
I'm really having a hard time. Yeah, because I'm trying to outdo myself.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think it's true with every person, even with actors and actresses, when they come out with a great movie. And really, it's a great movie. And then the next movie they make, and it's a bomb. You always try to do better than the last thing that you did.
You've got to keep the momentum up, haven't you, almost? And you've got to, in order to do that, particularly with books, you've got to force yourself to write something that's going to top the last one. And I don't know. I mean, there's some writers out there that do. I've read. There's a few writers in particular, I've read loads and loads of their stuff, and I just can't put them down because each one, hooks me in and keeps me gripped somehow. As a writer, so I'm going to flip it on its head now. So the challenge obviously is keeping the reader in that suspense and that. And you've mentioned that it's very challenging as the writer. So how do you plan a book like this? Do you plan yours out, strictly, or do you just sort of let it flow?
I try so hard to plan it out, so hard. And then I have these papers all over the place. And I can't even find my notes. So I have to, I'm not an organized writer. I'm not. I can do the dishes and I will think about the book, and I
Yeah.
will think, what am I going to do next? How am I going to solve the problem? How am I going to get that my characters from the corner and pull it to the center
Yeah.
and make a propel the story forward? How am I going to do it? So every page for me and every scene is a challenge. So I do force myself, chapter 1, blah, 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 chapter 2, blah, 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 chapter 3. Then I get bored and I say, okay, let me get back to writing. I don't feel
Yeah.
like doing this.
No.
That's not the fun part of writing. And I know, so I'm a penster, meaning that
Same here.
I make, exactly, okay. By the way, are you a writer?
Yeah, I did. I
Really?
started off. It's been a couple of years since I've actually written anything. I think COVID came along and sapped all my energy away, and then podcasting took over. But yeah, so I've written a few horror novels and a couple of children's books. But I never set out to be a writer, which is probably why I can never discipline myself to plan a book, because it literally just came out of nothing, and that's sort of I just leave all my books to kind of write themselves almost. I do wish I could be more like that, because I start writing a book, and if I all of a sudden don't connect with it, I can't see where it's going.
Exactly.
I step away from it, and then it's really hard to get back. So do you have certain, like, say, schedules or anything like that? But do you have certain places you go, times you go to write, or you're just trying to capture whatever bits you can and then finding time later on?
Well, for years, what I used to do is I used to pack up my bag, my laptop and everything, and go to a coffee shop.
Okay.
And then at some point, I stopped doing it because we live in Manhattan, but we have 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
So this room I made an office. So I found that I'm saving a lot of time, not packing up and then unpacking and packing again. So I sit here and I have this big window in front of me, and I see the skyline, and I see the tall buildings, and I see everything in front of me. So if I start falling asleep, I just look around.
Cool.
So this is what I do: is I get up in the morning. I'm a bodybuilder, so I go and lift weights.
Yeah.
So I'm home by 8 o'clock.
Right.
I get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I walk 2 or 3 blocks to the gym, and then I do what I do, and I come back. Then I sit and write. Then I get bored.
Right.
So I go to the kitchen and I make myself something to eat. So then I say, no, I feel guilty. I say, no, I'm wasting time. So I go back and I go to my computer. So I either do research, I do a lot of research, or I either do it physically, or I do it online, or I talk to people on the phone. I try to connect with people. Because most of the stuff that I write about, especially now, is I know nothing about. So there's a lot of time that goes into research. So then I write for a couple more hours, and then I get bored again. So I go to the kitchen, I cook.
Yeah.
So that, for me, cooking is the best.
Okay.
Because it really makes me relax.
Sure. Yeah.
So before I know it, it's 4 or 5 o'clock. So me running back and forth. And most of the time, I don't even leave the apartment.
Okay.
And if I get together with friends or whatever, I feel guilty for taking the time and not writing.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's always on my mind. Whether I write or not, it's on my mind.
It's a constant struggle, isn't it? I found when I was writing, I couldn't stop thinking about all the ideas just came to me. Like you said, stood there doing the washing up, or I'd be driving to work or something, and I'd be my most productive planning wise up here when I'm doing something else. And then since, like I say, it's been about 2 years easily since I've actually written anything, and all that time I've felt a constant guilt that I'm not trying to do something towards it, and that almost becomes unbearable at times. And then I almost resent writing altogether, because I'm like, it shouldn't be making me feel like this. But it's a hard thing to shake, though, isn't it, when you've had that inspiration?
It's very difficult. And what I find, and I don't know if it's true for you, that if I don't write for a day or two, let's say if we have to travel someplace and I can't write for a while, that to get back to it makes it even that much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, yeah, it's like taking a plant and it needs attention. It needs water, it needs looking at.
Yeah.
I'm also a gardener, so I have a huge garden. So everything needs attention, constant attention, even friends.
Yeah.
You call them every so often to keep in touch. The same thing with writing. It's almost like you're engaging with your characters, and they become your friends, they become your enemies, they become everything in life that you come across in real life. So if you lose that touch, I find, if I do, you agree with me?
Yeah.
Then it's very difficult to get back to it. Very difficult.
That's where I'm at the minute. I'm trying desperately. I've got 2 books I've been trying to write for the last 2, 3, 4 years even. And I've done bits and pieces, and then I've stepped away to do something else. And I've set myself a goal this year that I'm going to complete at least one of them. But I'm still struggling to just get back in that mindset. Life happens. I can't keep saying that. I've stopped blaming COVID now because
it's about time.
It's about time, exactly. Life resumes. But I think life does. Since I started writing when my kids were just before they were born and when they were babies, but they're nearly 8 years old now, both of them, and I mean it's just so much more hands-on with them at that age. I find a lot of my time is going that way, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more pressure I'm putting on myself to actually get back into doing it. The expectation is too much. But I'll
definitely. It's very, very, very difficult. What I do is when I get stuck writing my novel, really get stuck, and I get frustrated, I write articles for medium.com. Are you familiar?
I'm not. No, I saw this. I've seen a couple of people say about this. I've never looked at this myself. No, what tell us more.
Some very good writers there. You can do that and make money.
Okay.
With the clapping. So people read and they clap. And the more time people spend on your article, the more money you make. So it doesn't only go by clapping, it goes by the amount of that readers read. So I have about 4,000 followers so far. I keep accumulating followers.
Wow.
And that's time consuming. So what's nice about that, it gives me a nice outlet. So they have, so under the umbrella of Medium, they have different publishers in there. So one publisher specializes in psychology, one in politics, one, different things, humor, whatever. So you can contribute to all of them, but they have to accept you. Right. They see your track record, they see your writing and whatever. So that gives me a great outlet, but it also takes time away from my novel writing.
Yeah.
And as a matter of, you know what it is? That's what it is. When you write a novel, there's no instant gratification. When I write for Medium, I get instant people write in and say, oh, I love that and I love this and how wonderful, and they comment. So there's an engagement. So you always engage with other writers.
Yeah.
You should look into it.
I'm gonna, so maybe you've sold me on that.
So it's medium.com. Yeah.
Cool. I'll have a look. Yeah, I didn't even know about it. Oddly enough, the last sort of few weeks, you're the second or third one to mention it. So.
Oh yeah, there are writers from all over the world. Yeah. All over the world. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that might just be what I need.
Very interesting people.
And you hit the nail on the head there with the instant gratification, and that is where I think where podcasting took over is because I could still be creative, and I can put it out there within a few days, and I can. I can start to see people watching it, enjoying it, whatever. When it takes you 6 months or so to write a book and get it out there, you're talking about a year.
6 months? How about years?
Years, there you go. Yeah.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
I wouldn't say they're any good. I wouldn't say they're any good, but that's when I was at my peak.
I have friends who write books for 6. Oh really? Oh, you actually?
That's
really?
When I first.
So that's all you're talking?
When I first started off, this is it. I mean, it was bubbling away inside me. It came out of nowhere, and I just went with it. And for about 2 solid years, I would write on my lunch breaks at work, and I would write easily sort of 1,500 words a day or something like that. so yeah, to get to one of my novels, I think, yeah, within about 6 months, I had it start to finish a long time ago now, since I had that kind of productivity. And you just really made me feel better there, because I've had a book bubbling away, like I say, for about 3 years. And I kind of think, if I've not made anything of it now, maybe I'm not going to. But then you hear,
No,
books that can
no,
take
no,
years. So.
no, that's not true.
Cool. That's all right.
Yeah, that's not true. It took me 4 years to finish Stolen Truth.
Okay.
The book I'm writing now, I'm on my 3rd year.
Okay.
I could finish it a lot faster, but I'm a perfectionist. So,
Sure. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it for my living. I'm doing it more for my pleasure.
Yeah.
Although I think that I should be a lot more success. I have friends who spend 100% of their time selling their books. You know what I mean by selling?
Yeah. Like marketing.
Doing a lot of podcasts, doing a lot
Yeah.
of pushing. It's not in my nature. It
I
really,
know. No.
yeah, I don't like that. But hey, good for them.
Oh
They're
yeah.
selling books.
I'm
I don't begrudge them, but that's not in my nature. I
no.
can tell you, buy my book. That's
Yeah.
actually what you're doing.
Yeah.
What they're doing is buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy
Yeah.
my book.
That's it. Just let it
And
sit there and let people discover it and want to buy it, rather than it being rammed down their throat all the time. I think,
yeah,
yeah, I definitely am on.
but I think this is wonderful. This is a great outlet
Mm.
for writers or people who have a message to tell.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the podcast is something that I love to do. That's nice.
Yeah. I must admit, I am enjoying it, and it's kind of, this is what, as well as COVID, this is what I blame for the fact that I haven't been writing for so long, because this kind of became my sole focus. And I love talking to people like yourself, because I find other writers are so supportive and so inspirational. So it's and like you've already done within the time we've been talking, you put a lot of my fears to bed, that I'm not doing enough, or I'm not doing it quick enough, or and to know that that's just nature in terms of writing.
Yes, but what I decided a while ago is, yeah, I do feel a little guilty, but I try not to let it overpower me, because one side of my head says feel guilty, the other side says no, enjoy life.
Yeah.
Because I used to sit and write from morning till night for years. And then it got to the point where I said, okay, you know what, I didn't go on vacations, and I didn't go on trips, car trips and stuff like that, because I was addicted to it. As a matter of fact, one of my writer friends just wrote an article about being addicted to writing.
Right.
And how to, relax about it.
Sure.
Because then I think your creative juices run a lot faster and a lot harder if you just relax about it.
Yes. Yeah, I'll fully be with that. That's where my early books came from, and so quickly, because I just let them happen. And then the moment I started trying to force myself to do it, like, I got to get another book out now, I'd look for some ideas, I'd sit here and try and scratch around, and that's when I really started to struggle, because it's not organic anymore.
But you know what, like even on medium.com, make a note of it, go and visit and see how wonderful it is.
I'm gonna.
I can write as many articles as there are people who write every day.
Right. Okay.
It's okay. Articles. Some of them are good, some of them are not.
Yeah.
With me, I write an article. It's like now I've been sitting on it for a week. So what happens is when I get stuck, I walk away from it for about a day or two. Then I come back and I see what I did wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And then I get stuck. I walk away from it again for a day or maybe for a few hours, go back. And that's how I do it. I cannot, because I write about very heavy stuff. I write about politics. I write about psychology. I do a great deal of research. I cite other people, other professionals.
Yeah.
So that takes a long time. A lot of the writers on Medium don't do that. They write freely stuff.
Sure.
So I got up this morning and I went shopping and I went to the gym and stuff like that. That's not what I write. So I find that walking away from your writing for a little bit, even with a book, it does help.
Yeah.
although not to stay away from it
Not
for
stay
too long
away,
with
not
the
too
book.
long. Exactly. Don't become
Yeah.
strangers. So, yeah.
They become very good. That's what
Yeah.
you just. I've been dying to ask you a question.
Sure.
What's behind Dead Men Talk? What's behind it?
What's behind it in terms of the idea behind it? You mean, or
Yes.
yeah?
Yes.
So okay. So I like I say, I started off writing horror fiction. That's really what I do most. And I've since becoming published, I've dabbled in independent publishers and also self-publishing. And a few years ago, I decided to launch. It was just myself, but I started to launch under a publishing name of Dead Men's Tales Publishing, where I self-published a couple of things, and that really came from that. This was actually meant to be a video, almost like a vlog. A few years ago, it's just me talking about my books, and that's where I kept the name. I came up with the name Dead Men Talk to link it in with Dead Men's Tales Publishing. And the first 2 series of my podcast that were audio only were just me talking about my books and what influences were behind all my stories and my characters and that kind of thing. So that was really it. It was just basically me talking about my stuff. And I just thought I'd keep the name because it sounds cool. So
it does sound cool. I was trying to figure out, how does it relate to a podcast? Is there some meaning behind it?
it's
Do you
a
get
personal
people
thing. Yeah.
Do you get people questioning you about that?
Not so much. I had a few maybe to begin with, but then I think it made more sense when in the first 2 series because it was me referring back to my work, and again it's of the horror nature, so there's obviously a lot of dead people in it as well. I was a fan as well, way before I became a writer. I was a fan of the Pirates of the Caribbean films and the whole pirate thing. Dead Men Tell No Tales. I got a tattoo of it on my arm, so all of that really just came to a head, and I just thought it's the most perfect name. And then when I decided it was a podcast, I thought, well, I'm just talking about them, and I'm talking to people. So there you go.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So this is your main thing. You do the podcast.
I'm starting to try to wind it down. Not wind it down. I've done 3 different podcasts in total. This is my first one. This is like my baby almost. This is the one I keep going back to. But I've done another one about pro wrestling that I started and finished last year. And like I say, it kind of took over a bit last year. This was the only thing I was doing. And I really, really just got this yearning to now, I need to get back to writing. I think my creativeness has got to a point. My creativity, I need to go back to that. So I'm trying to keep it controlled this year, so I can spend some months over that this summer and that back in writing. But it helps me keep active, keep busy, keep creative. So and talk to people like yourself.
Do you keep a journal?
No,
do you keep a journal?
The amount of times I've tried to start doing that, and I think the reason I started writing, actually, I started a journal, like a diary thing, to my unborn children from the day that I found out I was going to be a dad. I had so much going on up here, I needed to write it down. So I guess my love for writing came from trying to keep a journal, and I'm not disciplined enough. I think, I would love to, because I'd love to have something that someone can look back on one day, or even just me, and see that part of my life. But no. Is it something you recommend doing?
Well, I can't say I'm perfect about that at all. I have about half a dozen journals in each room. And sometimes I forget to keep it next to my bedside because, dreams are wonderful, very creative juices right there.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I was watching a movie about a month ago, and I don't remember the title of it, but it had to do with a writer. And I thought it was very interesting that writer was dreaming, and he woke up in the middle of the night, grabbed his journal and wrote down, and then went back to sleep. And I said, wow, isn't that cool? I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
But I do write off and on, and it dates back many, many years. And when I go back to read it, wow, it's so interesting to see how, as a person, you evolve. and what used to bother you doesn't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, as you mature and get older, that
Yeah.
you let things fall by the wayside instead
Yeah.
of really, you know, when you're younger, you don't know how to deal with your emotions. I think that's the most wonderful thing, is when you go back, because as we grow older, we want to remember. There's a lot that I don't remember from my childhood. And for
Yeah.
some odd reason, I'm sure I've had some wonderful times in my life that I enjoyed,
Yeah.
but for some odd reason, and maybe it's my personality, I remember the bad. I remember
Okay.
the worst parts of my life.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
no fun being me, trust me, no
No,
fun.
no, no.
Because, you know, I mean, it's nice to go back and remember wonderful stuff.
Mm,
I mean, you know, because history is a part of us.
mm. Oh, yeah.
And no matter what, no matter how far you evolve and how well you evolve,
Mm.
there's always part of you, the good, bad, and indifferent, that stays with you for the rest of your life. And you can be driving down, listening to music, and stuff keep popping into your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
I mean, even when I talk to people, I'm a daydreamer, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I'm in company, I start daydreaming and they're talking to me. And I'm having a hard time engaging, you know, with
Yeah.
my brain. And I have to say, okay, stay still and just do this, do this.
Yeah.
I
Center
don't know if you
yourself.
have the same thing.
I do. My mind does wander. I am a daydreamer, but I daydream if I'm on my own, obviously away from, because I work from home as well. So once I get away from this, if I'm walking, listening to music for years and years and years as a kid, I would just lay on my bed put my headphones on, listen to music, and I would just drift off to somewhere else. And I think that it's a bad thing sometimes for me, because then I kind of bring myself back to reality, and it's, in some respects, it's probably not as good as the place I've just been, you know, at certain times of my life, but um, swings and roundabouts. But yeah, no, I do that. I do often drift off. And I think that's one thing that drove me to writing, because I thought maybe this other place that's going on up here needs to be on paper. You know, maybe that's how I make it more real. And I don't know, relate to it in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
No, I mean, you know, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
But my husband would get up in the morning, and at 9 o'clock, he'll go to the office, come home at 5 o'clock. Didn't see what I was doing all day long. Then when COVID hit and we ran to the country house, because with 2.5 people living there, I knew I wouldn't get COVID. It's not like being in Manhattan. So I moved to the country house. I lived there for 2 years. And my husband came with me. You know, the business wasn't really open. And then he started watching me and he said, "Oh my God, you sit and write all day long. How can you stand doing that?" He said, "Don't you get tired?" He said to me. And I looked at him and I said, "Really? What are you talking about? This is my life."
Yeah.
Now he's used to it. But
Yeah.
so I can concentrate in that respect. But when I'm with people, I have to work very hard to concentrate with what they're talking, because I get bored very easily.
Yeah.
You know, I really get bored with a lot of people. You know, they
Yeah.
talk about stuff that, you know, sometimes I
Yeah.
couldn't care less. I don't want to hear how much it costs you to do the drapery. I don't care about, I ate this and this for breakfast.
Yeah.
Couldn't care less. Talk to me about politics. Talk to me about this going on. Engage me, you know,
Yeah.
intellectually. Then
Yeah.
I'll be there with you.
Yeah.
But anything else, I'm bored.
Don't just talk at you. You know, I think that's one of the messages, isn't it? Is people that just literally just directly talk at someone and then move on to something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah.
So I guess I'm not really unique like that at all. I'm sure I'm not unique.
Probably not.
But it feels
Probably not.
odd sometimes.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And I think that's part of the thing about being creative. I think everyone is creative if they sort of tapped into it, but people who write music or whatever, I think there's so much going on and you're taking inspiration from so much either around you or already going on in your head. It's difficult to silence it all, you know, to concentrate on life. at times.
Yes.
Sometimes it's not as
Very
much fun,
difficult.
is it? That's,
Yeah.
All right, Henya, this has been fantastic. I will have to, sadly, I'll have to wind it down. And I know we talked about you don't like, sort of talking about yourself too much or selling yourself too much, but I'm going to give you I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now. Just let us know, let everyone know where they can find you, website, social media and the like, and where they can find and buy your book.
So mainly, like everybody else, Amazon. So just go to Amazon, Stolen Truth. There's another title, the same title, Stolen Truth, but that will be me, Henya Drescher. Go there and you'll find the book there.
There you go. Simple as that.
Yes, as simple as that.
This has been a pleasure having you on. And anything you can tell us about the book that you're working on, or is it a little bit sort of hush hush at the minute?
So the book I'm working on now, which I had no knowledge at all, but again, world affairs, I'm very engaged with what's going on in the world. And coming from a military country, Israel is a military country, not by choice. I have a lot of respect to soldiers. What they go through and what they come back with, PTSD and missing limbs, and young kids sending 17, 18 years old men sending young kids to do their bidding for them. So this is something that's very close to me. So I'm writing about soldiers in Afghanistan. Okay. So my protagonist is a female, and she's an intelligence officer. And she comes back with severe case of PTSD, and had to acclimate. They send you, they train you to go and fight. They put a gun in your hand, they put ammunition in your hand. But when you come back, they don't teach you how to reintegrate into society, and you're left on your own. And in the United States, and I know all over the world, I know in England as well, when I did my research, there are 200 ex-soldiers suicide per day by
That's
gun.
frightening, isn't it? Yeah.
A day.
Yeah.
Because they cannot deal with PTSD, they cannot deal with everyday life, and they get this, and nobody's helping them.
No.
So and there is suicide in the book, and you go through that with her, and that's basically what the book is all about.
Powerful, brilliant. Wow, there you go. So when that is ready to go, or when you're ready to kind of talk about it more, get back in touch, come back on.
I will.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Amazing.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me.
No problem at all. No, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic. I look forward to chatting to you again.
Yes.
Take care. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep updated about all future shows.